Gordon. I'll get to our Kyoto trip a little bit later, but first I want to tell you about our trip to Hagone, and it's a big national park a bit south of Tokyo, and that's where Fuji is. There you can see it in the background. Amazing to see. And you don't quite believe it when you see it, but there it is. And we were halfway up a mountain. We were in this big sort of tourist resort area. And you could keep going further up the mountain. There were sulfur springs everywhere. We were eating these sorts of eggs, these apparently, allegedly magical eggs. And there are the tour buses bringing all the people who would come to this place to look at the scenery and eat eggs. And here's a bit of signage, which seemed to me odd. You see Japanese signage in Japan, not with no English. You don't see that in Korea. And also the sinks here. Look, this is an old-fashioned sink. The Japanese aren't as technophilic as the Koreans are, or Canadians for that matter. None of those sinks where you hold your hand under the faucet and nothing comes out. Anyway, more signage just in Japanese. And this is in a tourist area. Then downtown to Ginza, and it was New Year's Day, so it was a national holiday. But the area, even though in downtown Tokyo, one of the largest cities in the world, on a holiday, it was pretty empty. Not that many people around on the streets, tourists, but not that many Japanese out to shop. And so we walked up and down Ginza, not entirely sure what to do with ourselves. And there's more of the street, not many cars on it, very few cars. And we just wandered around and did what Koreans call eye shopping. So we looked at the stores. Some of them were still open, and but for the most part, it was almost like being in Toronto during the 1950s on a weekend. Here's a department store. We'll get back to that later. And here's a Sebon or Kabon store. A bit of Japanese French, bit of drench or whatever you might call it. There's a Japanese store. There's Kabon again. And we weren't really sure what to do with ourselves. Not that many people out, a lot of stores closed, a lot of light and stuff, but not exactly what we expected. And here coming up is the Cartier store, a bit of a fuzzy image. Better one coming up in a minute, and it was pretty swank. It had this sort of arty thing on the outside, this sort of cutting edge, moving, abstract image, and inside were highly priced Cartier goods. Now, here's the Matsuyu Ginza, which is a big shopping store. There were a couple of them that we saw, and I'll get to those in a minute too. And here's a Chinese restaurant. Not many Chinese restaurants in Tokyo. And here's a shuttered store. A lot of shuttered places in Ginza on New Year's Day. There's another shuttered one. And here's a place that is, well, it's got a gate as part of its doorway, and that gate was firmly locked. And here's another place that's shuttered closed. And here's another place that has the steel, whatchamacallit, just pulled down. So it was closed too. And that was a lot of what Ginza was like. Now here's the Matsuya Ginza, one of the shopping centers. So we decided to pop in instead of just stick to the street. That's the inside. And I took a 360 view of the inside when we walked in. That's another angle of it. So again, very few people. Here are some people shopping, maybe heading to the elevator to go home and not shop. And here are a few people thumbing through the goods, or maybe a store clerk. And then out on the street again, and more closed stores. These were all places that were firmly shut. And here's a nice looking tour bus. Perhaps tourists were the main people out in the street. And here's a back street, which was also very empty. Again, you don't see that in Seoul. Not in the downtown area. You see norabangs and everything, singing rooms, restaurants. But in Ginza, pretty sparse. And here's a side street just off the main Ginza street. Again, very few people, but right downtown. And this is Shinjuku. It's another area. This is the quote-unquote entertainment area. And it was quite different. There were people everywhere. And so we ended up walking around Shinjuku. It's a bit of a racy area, but Hyunmi and I were on our best behavior. So we walked around there, and then it was back on our bus and back to the hotel.